I have been on this bench long enough to know that some cases arrive looking small until the first human being opens their mouth. On paper, Ava Mercer's file was nothing special. Parking tickets, towing fees, storage fees, missed hearing penalties, an assault notation claiming she spat at the bench during a prior appearance, $12,460 in total. Then she walked into my courtroom, and everything the paper claimed to know began falling apart. Rain tapped the courthouse windows before sunrise that morning, first like fingertips, then hard enough to sound like knuckles. I was already in my robe with a file thick enough to bend in my hands. After all my years on the bench, I can feel trouble before anyone speaks. Some mornings, the room goes quiet long before the people do. That morning was one of them. The courtroom smelled like wet wool, old wood, and burnt coffee from the clerk's desk. The light was a tired gray that made every face look worn out before a single word had been spoken. The city wanted money. That is how it always begins. Numbers, balances, penalties, 3 unpaid parking violations, towing, impound storage, missed court dates, administrative assessments. Then, at the bottom, the line meant to make everyone stop asking questions. Assault on the bench. That was the phrase. The city was not merely trying to collect fees from Ava Mercer, it was trying to turn her into a threat. I looked at the surname before I looked at the amount. Mercer, same as the police chief, Daniel Mercer, a man whose name reached rooms before he did. Word had already moved through the hallway before I took the bench. The chief's daughter was coming in. Half the room expected arrogance. The other half expected favors. I expected neither. I expected a person. That is the only way I know to do this job and still sleep at night. Then the side door opened and Ava Mercer stepped into my courtroom. Every eye in that room turned at once. You could feel it happen. She wore a faded green coat that had lost a button near the collar. Under it was a diner shirt washed so many times the fabric had almost given up. Her jeans were clean but thin at both knees. One shoelace was bright white and clearly new. The other was old, flattened, and gray. People who are barely keeping life together always end up wearing repairs beside wear. I noticed those things. A judge who does not notice details should not be one. Her hands told me more than her clothes. Red knuckles, skin roughened by soap and winter air, a pale burn mark near the right thumb, the kind people in kitchens get when they work too fast because they cannot afford to slow down. Her nails were short, with a few scraps of old black polish left clinging to the edges. Not fashion, just the ghost of a better week. She kept those hands clasped too tightly, like if she let go, they might shake. Her lower lip was split at one corner, crusted dark where it had dried, and a strand of hair kept slipping from her ponytail and sticking to her cheek. She never brushed it away. That told me her mind was already beyond vanity, and somewhere much harder. Mr. Colin Reese stood for the city. He was neat in the way some men wear neatness like armor. Blue tie, silver watch. Files arranged so squarely on counsel table you could measure them. He was not cruel, and I will say that clearly, but he trusted records more than people, and records had already told him who Ava Mercer was supposed to be. He began with the numbers, because people like him always do. 3 parking tickets left unpaid, 1 impound fee growing by the day, 2 missed appearances, 1 outburst serious enough, in the city's view, to justify an assault notation. He asked me to uphold every dollar and every label. His voice stayed cool and level, which somehow made it colder. I looked at Ava and spoke as gently as I could. "Miss Mercer," I said, "I've read the papers. Now I need your life in your own words." She lifted her chin, but not in pride. It looked more like effort, the kind that hurts the neck because you have been carrying too much too long. When she answered, her voice came out dry and scraped. She said she had not lived with her father in almost 3 years. That got everyone's attention, though nobody said a word. She rented 1 room in a motor lodge by the highway when she could afford it. When she could not, she slept in her car behind the diner where she worked nights. The car that got towed was not extra transportation. It was shelter on the bad weeks. I asked why she missed the first hearing. She swallowed once before answering. Her mother had kidney failure. That meant her mother's kidneys were shutting down and could no longer clear the poisons from her blood. Ava had been taking her to treatment before dawn and then working breakfast shift after. The first court date landed on a morning when her mother could not breathe correctly, so Ava chose the hospital. The paper said absent. Life said daughter. Mr. Reese looked down and turned a page. He said illness did not erase city fees. He was not wrong in the smallest sense. Rules must cover everyone or they mean nothing. But small truth can hide a larger one. That is where systems fail. They grab the nearest technical correctness and call it justice because the deeper work requires imagination. So I asked Ava about the tow. Her eyes flicked toward the back benches, then back to me. She said the car was tagged outside the dialysis center. An officer ran the plate, saw the last name, and asked if Chief Mercer was her father. When she said yes, he laughed once and told her she could afford the fees then. He still called the tow truck. Her mother's blanket was in the back seat. So was her little sister Lily's inhaler, her school shoes, and a grocery bag with frozen peas. Ava begged for 10 minutes to retrieve the inhaler. She showed them a school photo of Lily on her phone. Nobody let her touch the car. By then, I think everyone in that room was asking the same silent question. If a young woman carries a powerful man's last name but not his help, what exactly does that name buy her? Respect? Or just a different kind of humiliation? Then I asked why she missed the second hearing. She stared at the front of my bench so long, I thought she might not answer. Then she said her mother died at 4:12 that morning. She said it quietly, in the way people say facts they have repeated often enough to survive the day. She came to court straight from the funeral home because she was terrified to miss again. She was still wearing the same shirt she had signed papers in. When people hear the word breakdown, they imagine noise. They imagine shouting, falling, wildness. Most real breakdowns begin with stillness. Ava went very still. Mr. Reese asked whether grief excused threatening behavior in court. She tried to answer him, but her mouth caught on the words. Then she pressed 2 fingers to her split lip. When she pulled them away, I saw fresh red. She said one more thing before the room blew open. She said her father had not come to the hospital. He had not come to the funeral home. He had sent a patrol sergeant with flowers and a printed card. Then she laughed once, but it was not laughter. It sounded like glass breaking inside a locked room. She lifted her face toward me, trying to speak through blood and air, and a thin spray of spit and red struck the rail below my bench. Everything happened in less than 30 seconds. A chair scraped. A bailiff lunged. Someone shouted, "She spat at the judge." Ava's wrists were yanked behind her so fast that her shoulder hit the table edge. Mr. Reese stepped backward. The clerk froze with one hand over her mouth. By the time I stood, the handcuffs were already on. I raised my hand and said, "Take those cuffs off." No one moved. I said it again, slower. "Take them off." My bailiff looked at me, then at the red on the rail. "Judge, she spat at you." I looked down. Most of what I saw was blood. Mr. Reese started to object. He said the bench had been struck. He said officers acted to protect the room. He said intent could be inferred. That means he wanted me to assume motive from contact and ignore the body in front of me. I told him assumptions do not belong where facts are possible. Then I asked for the hallway camera, the bench camera, and the intake photograph taken at booking. While the clerk pulled the footage, I asked Ava one question. "Did anyone offer you water this morning?" "No, Your Honor." "Did anyone ask if you needed medical help?" "No." "Did anyone note your split lip before the outburst?" Again, no. That silence spread farther than any argument could have. A room full of adults suddenly understood that a young woman had been moving through public systems with visible injury, and no one had paused long enough to see a person before documenting a problem. The first video came up above the jury box. No sound, only time in the corner. There was Ava at the metal detector, shoulders tucked in, arms wrapped around herself. She touched her mouth, bent forward once, then raised one finger, small and careful, asking for a moment. No one came. The second angle showed her inside my courtroom from the side. Mr. Reese was speaking. Ava pressed a napkin to her lip. When he mentioned threatening behavior, she flinched before he even finished the sentence. Then she tried to answer, her body folded on the first word. She coughed blood and spit forward while turning her head down. The spray hit the rail. Not me, not once. Then the intake photo appeared. It had been taken 3 minutes after the handcuffs went on. Ava's lower lip was split wider than before. One front tooth had cut the flesh from the inside. There was blood on her sleeve where she had tried to cover her mouth. The booking officer had marked visible injury, but that detail never made it into the city's summary. I turned to Mr. Reese and asked him why. Why was the injury left out? Why did the summary say she spat at the judge when the video showed blood from a fresh cut? Why did no one note her request for a pause in the hallway? Why was a grieving young woman treated like a threat before she was treated like a person? His jaw tightened. For the first time that morning, he had no clean stack of words ready. Finally, he said, "Courtrooms depend on order." He said officers cannot wait to sort motive in a live disturbance. He said the rules protect everyone in the room, including me. He was right about the need for order. I told him so. Then I told him order without judgment is just speed. And speed is how injustice often gets dressed and sent out the door before anyone notices. I said the law is a tool, and a tool is only as honest as the hand using it. If a hammer hits the wrong board, we do not praise the hammer, we fix the aim. This young woman carried debt, grief, and a mouthful of blood into my courtroom. The system looked at the mess and called it danger. That was not discipline. That was cowardice wearing a badge and a clipboard. The room went so quiet, I could hear the heating vent click. Ava stood there with her hands now free, but still held close to her body, as if she had not quite registered that the cuffs were gone. Mr. Reese lowered his eyes to the table. He made one last try. He said if the court softened here, others might think tears erase rules. I told him tears erase nothing. Truth changes everything. Then I picked up my gavel. People think a ruling starts with the strike. It does not. It starts in the breath before it, in the second where the room understands something final is about to become real. I looked at Ava Mercer, then at the city's table, then at the stain on the rail below me, and I spoke one sentence at a time. The assault charge is dismissed. Gavel. The emergency arrest in this courtroom is vacated. Gavel. All fees tied to the impound period during her mother's final treatment are removed. Gavel. The missed appearance fees are removed. Gavel. The storage charges beyond the first day are removed. Gavel. The remaining parking debt is reduced to an amount this court considers real and payable. $120, no interest, no penalty stacked on top. Gavel. Ava did not cry in the way people expect. She blinked hard once, then her jaw loosened like a knot untying itself. Her fingers went to the edge of the table, not to grip it, but almost to test whether the wood was real. Her shoulders dropped 1 inch. That single inch said more than sobbing could. She tried to thank me, but no sound came out. So she nodded instead, slow, careful, formal. The kind of nod a person gives when simple fairness has become almost too much to touch. Then I did something judges should do more often than they do. I asked the clerk to bring water, not for the room, for Ava. When the paper cup reached her, she wrapped both hands around it as though it carried heat. I asked whether Lily had an inhaler now. She whispered, yes. A nurse from the clinic had dropped one at the motel the night before. Then I reached into the side drawer of the bench and took out a card. Not money, not performance, just a plain card for the court's family support office with one name written on the back. Denise. I told Ava that Denise helped people find emergency housing, grief counseling, and school support for children. I told her to call that day, not later, not when things got worse. Sometimes dignity begins with knowing where to knock. That was when a voice rose from the back bench. Rosa Flores, the manager from the diner by the bus depot. I recognized her face even before I knew her name. She asked if she could speak. I allowed it. She said Ava had worked double shifts for months without complaint. She said the girl packed leftover toast for her sister before school, kept a spelling list in her apron pocket, and quizzed Lily between wiping tables. Then Rosa looked straight at the city table and said the line everyone in that room needed to hear. This child is not living off a badge. She's surviving in spite of one. That landed exactly where it needed to. 2 weeks later, the video leaked. Not the ugly rumor, the full clip, the hallway request for a pause, the blood on the napkin, the turn of her head, the rail taking the spray. By noon, every local station had it. By evening, the story had traveled far beyond the county line. Letters began arriving at the clerk's office, grocery cards, small checks, apartment leads. One retired dentist offered to repair Ava's broken tooth for free. A landlord waived the deposit on a small place near Lily's school. Church groups sent gift cards. The diner held a jar for them near the register. A mechanic repaired the old car for parts only. A funeral home refunded half the service fee. By the end of 2 weeks, over $4,000 in help had arrived. Not enough to erase grief, enough to change a month. Sometimes that is the difference between collapse and continuity. 6 months later, Ava came back. Not as a defendant. She sat quietly in the back until the calendar ended. She wore a navy coat with both buttons. Her shoes matched. Her hair was brushed smooth and tucked behind both ears. The scar on her lip remained, but no longer looked lonely. Lily sat beside her in a yellow cardigan, holding a library book like a trophy. When I asked how school was, Lily told me she had read 12 books that month and showed me the inhaler in her backpack pocket with visible pride. Ava told me she had moved into a 2-room apartment above a florist. Rosa had helped her get more day shifts. Denise had found grief counseling and after-school care. The dentist fixed her tooth. A local community fund covered 1 semester of night classes. She was studying medical billing because, she said, stable sounded beautiful. I understood exactly what she meant. Then she took a folded paper from her bag. It was Lily's spelling test. Every word correct. At the top, in crooked pencil, Lily had written, "Ava, help me." That paper was worth more than half the evidence I see in a month. The letters kept coming for weeks after that. Some were simple, written in the careful block print of people who did not trust themselves with too many words. A grandmother in New Haven mailed $20 and wrote that her own daughter once stood in traffic court shaking so hard she could not hold a pen and that no one had looked twice. A high school civics class from Hartford sent a card signed by 31 students after their teacher showed them the clip and asked what public service was supposed to mean. A nurse from the dialysis center sent a note explaining that she remembered Ava and her mother by name, that the mother always apologized for being trouble, and that Ava never once left the chair beside her, even when her phone kept lighting up with work messages. The clerk's office stacked those envelopes in a tray beside the printer until there was no room left in the tray. One morning, my clerk asked whether I wanted any of the letters forwarded to Ava personally. I said yes, but first I read through them because public response tells you something about what a community is starving to hear. What those letters said over and over in different handwriting was that people recognized themselves in her, not the chief's daughter, not the headline, the daughter who missed court because she was busy being a daughter, the sister carrying an inhaler for a child, the worker trying to keep a roof over 2 heads and a dying mother warm. The public understood instinctively what the system had missed on paper. She was not gaming anything. She was drowning and still trying to row. The city, of course, issued a statement. There was regret over the misunderstanding, a commitment to review procedures, and the usual promise to balance compassion with enforcement. I have read enough statements like that to know what they are designed to do: sand down the edges, replace accountability with atmosphere. I sent word back through the administrative office that I was not interested in atmosphere. I wanted the revised intake checklist, the body camera guidance, and the written instruction requiring visible injuries to be documented before escalation. If people are going to use my courtroom as the place where damaged facts finally get corrected, then I expect the offices feeding those facts into my courtroom to learn something. I thought about Chief Mercer, too, though not with much warmth. Public power has many failures, but among the ugliest is the kind that lets a child carry your name and none of your shelter. He never appeared before me in that matter. No apology on the record. Maybe that disappointed the audience outside, but it did not disappoint me. I did not need his face to know the shape of his absence. Ava had already testified to that more convincingly than any cross-examination could. Months after the ruling, Denise from the support office stopped by Chambers with an update. Lily had improved her attendance, and the school counselor believed the child was finally settling enough to learn without scanning every room for danger first. Ava had not missed a single night class. She still worked too much, still carried more than anyone her age should have to carry, but she had stopped apologizing before every request. Some people live for years under the idea that their need itself is an offense. The first sign of healing is often not joy. It is the disappearance of unnecessary apology. There is a reason that matters to me. Family court taught me that suffering rearranges language long before it rearranges circumstance. Women begin every sentence with, "I'm sorry." Children say, "It's okay," when it clearly is not. Men call collapse a rough patch because if they use the real word, they fear the whole structure will come down. Part of a judge's work, if she is doing it honestly, is to listen for the lies pain teaches people to tell about themselves and then refuse to ratify them. People imagine the law as a hammer. Some days it is. But hammers are crude tools. The better image is a scale, and scales only work when someone checks what is being placed on each side. On one side of Ava's case sat tickets, fees, missed appearances, and a red stain on a wooden rail. On the other sat a dead mother, a child's inhaler in an impounded car, a split lip, a motel room, a diner shift, a sister with a school spelling list, and a city too rushed to notice blood before shouting assault. My duty was not to admire the paperwork. It was to weigh the truth. And if that story stayed with the public, I think it is because people are desperate to see that kind of weighing happen somewhere. They know what it feels like to be summarized by institutions that never looked up from the form. They know what it is to have one bad morning turned into a permanent category. So when a courtroom slows down enough to say, no, we are going to look again, the relief is larger than one person's case. It becomes a kind of civic memory. I am Judge Judy Scheindlin. I have sent people to jail, and I have also sent people home. Both acts carry weight. But if you do this work long enough, you learn the law cannot heal what it refuses to recognize. A human being is never the worst second of the worst day she has lived through. Not if we bother to look again. That is what stayed with me after Ava Mercer left my courtroom. Not the stain on the rail, not the headlines, not even the sound of the gavel. What stayed was simpler. A grieving daughter came in expecting to be crushed, and for once the room chose not to crush her. That is where justice begins.